speaker for the plenary session is our very own Professor A.R. Fatihi from the Department of Linguistics, who also runs the DRS, the coordinator of the DRS in the Department of Linguistics. He needs no introduction, not much introduction, but a very dynamic person, well versed in both English and Urdu, and running the DRS very well. I also welcome Professor Fatihi, who has agreed to give this lecture for the benefit of research scholars, students, and us teachers too. Professor Fatihi with his plenary talk.
Professor Zafaruddin Saab, Professor Najma Mahmood, Dr. Zaidi, Professor Zeba. At the outset, I must thank the organizer for giving me this opportunity to share a few thoughts related to translation with you. This is basically about theorizing the whole process of translation, and the title that I have chosen for today's presentation is the socio-semiotic approach and translation of fiction. So it mainly deals with the translation of fiction and the problems related to that. I have cited example mainly from Abdul Samad's novel Khwabon Ka Savera, and that has been translated by my dear friend Meher Faruqi, yes. And so I have cited example mainly from Meher's translation of Khwabon Ka Savera. So I'll start presenting the paper, and we may have some interaction afterwards. During the past 2 or 3 decades, developments in the field of transformational grammar, semantics, information theory, anthropology, semiotics, psychology, and discourse analysis have exerted great influence on general translation theory, enabling the discipline to broaden the areas of investigation and to offer fresh insights into the concept of correspondence on transference between linguistics and cultural systems. The traditionally much debated dichotomy between literal and free translation has been replaced by various linguistically informed modern distinctions like NIDA's formal versus dynamic correspondence, Catford's formal correspondence versus textual equivalence, or Newmark's semantic as opposed to communicative translation. In general, more attention has been paid to the translation processes and greater emphasis placed on equal response of the target language reader. Such new perspectives on theoretical front, as well as the fairly extensive development in a specific interlingual contrastive studies, have promoted considerably the understanding and mastery of the nature and skill of translation. The paper intends to discuss the necessity of introducing the socio-semiotic approach to translation of fiction. According to the socio-semiotic approach, the text is a semantic unit with meaning and function. It is a product in the sense that it is an output, something that can be represented in systematic terms. It is also a process in the sense of ongoing semantic choices, a movement through the network of potential meaning, with each set of choices constituting the environment for a further set. A novel, short story, actually is a unity of meaning, style, and function which we cannot discuss separately. However, these are seen to be insufficient when applied to the translation of fiction. Translation of fiction has benefited very little from recent development in linguistics. Shen Dan, 1996, in particular emphasizes the necessity for applying literary stylistics to the translation of prose fiction, which is a significant contribution to the study of fiction translation, because some specific problems posed by translation of fiction, such as deceptive equivalence, can be rather effectively solved by the introduction of stylistic analysis. Shen Dan's attempt to introduce literary stylistics into translation of fiction is quite significant. However, the nature of fiction translation cannot be restricted in the literary stylistic analysis that considers the style only as artistically or thematically motivated choices and focuses on the translation for foreground features of prose fiction. Deceptive equivalence is not the only problem that occurs in translation of fiction. The whole process involved in the translation of fiction is rather complicated, including encoding of the message by the prose fiction writer and decoding and re-encoding the message by the fictional translator. The message, including meaning, style, and function, is what the prose fiction author wishes to convey through his/her fiction in the order of pragmatic level, semantic level, syntactic level, and discourse level. This is the process how the fiction writer encodes his or her messages. However, how the translator decodes the message is in the reverse order. At first, the translator comes across the whole discourse of the prose fiction, and then he/she analyzes it at the syntactical, semantic, and finally pragmatic levels. At the end, the translator perceives the message conveyed by the source language text. The most important thing is how the translator re-encodes the message he/she understands, which is the basis of the translating activity. The order is very similar to the fiction writer's encoding process, but the language implied is different. The translation criteria deriving from the socio-semiotic approach are correspondence in meaning and similarity in style and function, which turns out to be well suited to verify the quality of fiction translation. Correspondence in meaning is actually correspondence in designative meaning, linguistic meaning, and pragmatic meaning. Similarity in style is similarly in both authorial style and text style. Similarity in function is similarity in the sixth function advocated by Peter Newmark, and he has listed the 6 different functions of language. The translation of meaning and reflection of the style and function, therefore, should rely on both linguistic context and non-linguistic context, that is, culture and society. A qualified translator should acquire language competence and cultural knowledge of both the target language and source language, and take pains to reduce the loss and distortion in his or her translation. The translation may achieve the translation criteria, that is, the correspondence in meaning and similarity in the style and function. The recognition of this very fact of textual and contextual nature of translation have positive consequences for the understanding of translation as a whole. Based on the linguistic textual nature of translation and its relevance for translation practices, the paper attempts to show the result of an analytical study that has been carried out to show the initiators' and translators' communicative purposes in the original and the translated text of Abdus Samad's Urdu fiction, Khwabon Ka Savera, translated by Meher Farooqi. The focus of this paper is mainly upon the semantic dimension of the hypertext, a term used by Jennett. According to Jennett's definition, translation is characterized as a case of hypertextuality, where hypertext and hypotext only differ formally, whereas the thematic component of the text involved remains somehow unaltered. In all other hypertextual phenomena where thematic changes do occur, we cannot talk about translation anymore, but about commentaries, text reductions, amplifications, splits, etc. It suggests that translations are characterized by a double binding. On the one hand, there is a binding to the source language text, and on the other hand, there is a binding to the communicative conditions on the part of the receiver. This double binding should be the point of departure for establishing the concept of equivalence. The best method to find out interlinguistic and intercultural differences in text type convention is to carry out parallel text analysis or parallel text comparison. The initial comparison involves the correspondence between the source language text and the target language text. In Jennett's terminology, a paratext includes text title, subtitle, intertitle, prefaces, postscripts, marginal notes, footnotes, final notes, epigraphs, illustrations, jackets, etc. We would say that paratexts are text structural features which may coincide between source language and target language text belonging to the same type text. According to the translation strategy implemented by the translator, some paratext not present in the original may be required to be added in the translated text. For instance, when translating a literary text, the translator may decide to keep many culture-bound source language words by using a foreignizing translation strategy. In order to ensure that target language readers grasp at least some of the original's meaning, the translator may decide to include footnotes or final notes to facilitate the comprehension of strikingly unfamiliar terms due to cultural distance between the source language and target language communities. These added notes can be descriptive or more elaborative, can have a descriptive or a more elaborate explanatory content. To elaborate this point further, let's have a look at the passage from Dawn of Dreams, a translation of Khwabon Ka Savera. And I'm quoting from Meher's translation. Don't cry, inshallah we will meet again. When Surah Fatiha is recited in this manner, then separation is only temporary and dear ones are reunited. Don't cry, your tears will darken our path. Pull yourself together. Have faith in God. Whatever He does for the best. He is surely the best judge of everything. Bhaiya, I am leaving you in God's hands. Say salam to Dulha Bhai. Tell him not to forget his promises to visit us. Goodbye, Appa. Goodbye, Alvida. So this is one of the passages that I have taken from Dawn of Dreams. There is another that I want to quote. Suddenly everything was over. The news had been floating around for quite some time now. The newspapers were full of it, but no one really believed it. And like so many other rumors, people talked and then forgot all about it. Even those who were in supporters did not believe that it could actually be implemented, but it had really happened. The law had been passed, and now like an epidemic, it was going to knock on people's door in the dead of the night. Of course, no one knew what it was going to be like, but it is inevitably had quickly taken root in. Let me read out the Urdu passage that Abdul Samad has done. ऐसा लगा जैसे सबके हाथों के तोते अचानक उड़ गए हैं. ऐसा लगा जैसे सबके हाथों के तोते अचानक उड़ गए हों. खबर तो बहुत दिनों से गश्त कर रही थी, अखबारों में उसके चर्चे भी खूब हो रहे थे, लेकिन किसी को इस पर यकीन नहीं आता था और बहुत सी बातों की तरह ये बात भी एक कान से जाकर दूसरे कान से निकल जाती. जो लोग इसकी हिमायत में थे उन्हें भी पूरे तौर पर यकीन नहीं था कि ऐसा हो ही जाएगा, लेकिन ऐसा हो गया था. कानून पास हो गया था और अब वो वबाई मर्ज की तरह रातों में दस्तक भी देने वाला था. वो नजर वो अब भी नहीं आया था, लेकिन उसका यकीन अचानक लोगों के दिलों में जड़ पकड़ गया था. जब से ये खबर आई थी, हवेली में कोहराम सा मचा हुआ था. In the passage number 1, the use of the term like Inshallah, Surah Fatiha, Bhaiya, Dulha Bhai, and Alvida are strikingly unfamiliar terms for English readers due to the cultural distance between the source language Urdu and the target language English. According to the translation strategy discussed earlier, some paratext not needed and presented in the original was required to be added in the translation text. When we pay attention to the second passage for further discussion and elaboration, we discover that Meher Faruqi prefers to use the expression, suddenly everything was over, which roughly corresponds to ऐसा लगा जैसे सबके हाथों के तोते अचानक उड़ गए. So you can see the difference between these two expressions. The cultural connotation of tote ud gaye has not been captured in the expression suddenly everything was over. As we know, creative energy constitute a rich translation resource to the extent that they provide the translator with an accurate pool of words related to the topics of source language text and precise guidelines as to the target language text overall structure. In Meher's translation, we hardly find the use of paratext or metatext in the translated text. In translation, metatext can also be a very valuable resource in order to better understand the content and the importance of source language text. Equivalence range. Equivalence in translation does not mean absolute correspondence between source language text and target language text. In translation theory, once the textualization process of source language text has taken place, the text is articulated in 4 dimensions mutually imbricated: pragmatic, semantic, syntactic, and semiotic. Both source language text and target language text must have the same textual dimensions, that is pragmatic, semantic, stylistic, and semiotic. The content of each dimension will vary from close resemblance to total differentiation. If target language text is to be considered a translation of source language text, then there should be some strong link between them. The original's communicative intention should remain somehow unaltered. The content of target language may vary if the target language linguistic and cultural norms call for a modification in order to maintain the source language textualized intention, and the stylistic devices will vary as they are bound to the target language text and language typology. Any modification of the source language text's communicative purpose outside the above mentioned parameters will yield target language text which may have a hypertext-hypotext relationship, but which cannot be called translation proper. There will be adaptation, summaries, commentaries, etc., but not translations. Thus, by translation equivalence range, we understand the degree of coincidence and discrepancy between the diverse source language text and target language dimensions, that is pragmatic, syntactic, semantic, stylistic, and semiotic, which keeps the closest resemblance at the pragmatic dimension and modifies the semantic, stylistic, and semiotic dimensions accordingly. By definition, the translation equivalence range allows for more than one right solution to particular translation problems and corroborates the fact that one single source language text can be translated by using different translation strategies ranging from source language text adherence to more target language audience focus. The present study has listed the main translation problems encountered, and it has classified them according to the textual dimensions. The irregularities and anomalies encountered during the study were classified according to the following parameters in each textual dimension. Pragmatic dimension. A crucial aspect of the dimension has to do with the modality markers which indicate if the source language text authors express subjectivity that ranges from practically zero presence to a strong presence has been maintained, slightly altered, or wholly modified in target language text, thereby changing one of the most important elements of source language text sender's intentionality. Two concepts worked out by House and Casper to deal with the pragmatics of politeness markers in English and German prove very useful also in translation studies. These markers are downgraders and upgraders. Downgraders are defined as markers which play down the impact of X utterance is likely to have on Y. Upgraders are defined as modify markers which increase the force of the impact an utterance is likely to have on the addressee. In our discussion, we would say that downgraders are text modality markers which play down the impact and source language text expression is likely to have on target language text readers. And upgrader are text modality markers which increase the force of the impact on source language text utterance is likely to have on the text language addressee. As stated above with regard to the primacy of the textual pragmatic dimension, a translated text is said to be equivalent to the original, basically if the source language text author's intention is maintained in the translating process and reproduced and perceived as such by the target language readers. Thus, the degree of faithfulness to the original, pragmatically speaking, will increase as the number of cases of downgrading and upgrading decreases or ideally approaches zero. The following are some of the examples of discrepancy between source language text and target language text at the pragmatic level. Now I cite examples for upgrading as well as downgrading. I cite the first example. Upgrading, हम तो जान रहे थे एक दिन होगा, ये एक दिन होगा। अंग्रेज सरकार बहादुर को निकालने के लिए गांधी जी ने छोटे छोटे लोगों को इतने आगे बढ़ा दिया तो अब तो वो साले सर पर चढ़कर नाचेंगे। पटवारी जी ने गमछा से माथे के पसीने को पोंछते हुए कहा। And this has been translated by Meher, and now I am quoting from Meher's translation. I knew this would happen. In order to get rid of the English Sarkar, Gandhiji has encouraged these low caste people. Now these fellows are going to dance on our heads. Patwari ji spoke, wiping the sweat from his forehead with a large red checked handkerchief. The translated passage is only an approximation of the original scene, a line upgrading of the referent. The translator has made alteration in the image by using these fellows for wo sale, which is much more polite and acceptable in comparison of wo sale. Nevertheless, the example below provide an example of downgrading. And again I am quoting from Khwabon Ka Savera. कमरे की फिजा बड़ी मगमूम थी, घर की टिक टिक, घड़ी की टिक टिक उदासी की खामोश ऐलान कर रही थी। सांसों की ज़ेरो बम पर सोच और फिक्र के बादल छाए हुए थे। बस में बातें भी हो रही थीं, आपस में बातें भी हो रही थीं, लेकिन जुमलों के दरमियान जो फासले पैदा हो रहे थे वो बड़े गहरे और तारीक थे। इन फासलों के दरमियान किसी के मुंह से जो कुछ भी निकलता वो दूर तारीक भीगी हुई रात में वक्त के ऐलान करते हुए गजर की आवाज की तरह किसी जागते हुए जहन पर पड़ता। क्या ख्याल है आपा तुम्हारा? मैं क्या बता सकती हूँ, ये इस बात की सख्त मुखालिफ हैं। And I would like to draw your attention on the use of ye, especially in our Urdu or rather Indian society generally. I mean, ladies don't prefer to use the name of the husband, so they equate it with ye or wo. The atmosphere in the room was oppressive, and now I am quoting from Meher's translation. The atmosphere in the room was oppressive, and the ticking of the clock was like a mute declaration of gloom. There was so much tension, it was difficult to breathe. Although they were conversing, every sentence uttered created dark and unfathomable distances. Whatever was said between pauses had the effect of a gong announcing the hour on a dark, wet night to a sleepless, restless mind. Apa, what do you think? So this is a translation that she has done. Now, the Urdu reader moves within the same cultural framework as the author. So the modes of address trigger a similar connotation and association. As part of the source language culture competence, the translator should be able to deduce most cultural association implied by the author. Still, the modes of address used in translated text call up elements of meaning different from the ones activated in source language text. The communicative relevance of ye in Urdu is totally different from English he, and therefore use of he for ye is an example of downgrading. Semantic dimensions. The most frequent problem encountered during the study appear in this dimension. They correspond to omission, addition, complete change of meaning, change of focalization, and change of connector. The most frequent case reported in this dimension was complete change of cultural meaning of the original. It occurred because Meher often had problems finding out the appropriate English equivalent. Let us see some examples. To some extent, sometimes Meher opted for substituting one item for another, trying to smooth the idea conveyed by Abdus Samad, but the result does not always succeed, since there is a change in the lexical meaning. For example, let's scan the use of pretending in the translated text. According to Cambridge Dictionary of English, the word pretending means to believe as if something is true when you know it is not. Hence, when the translator uses pretending for taslim in the sentence, Alia Khatun ne afaq ko goya bada taslim karke usse jira ki. Now, bada taslim karke, and she has used the word.
Except would be the word for taslim.
Yeah, please. Yeah, possibly.
Translation doesn't seem to be very
She may be trying to convey that there is something true, although little. Moreover, still in regard to the equivalence at word level, other example resembles to deceive what the source text meant to convey. Thus, Sala in the source text become fellow in the target text. For me, the translation failed in choosing correct cultural terms. It would be more educated to use Sala because it sounds more natural. I think all of you agree with this.
No, I think rascal would be good.
Or lousy fellows.
Rascals would be good.
I suppose this is the best equivalent in English translation, taking into consideration that in every language there are some borrowings that enter and become part of the lexicon of that language. In the target text we have the well-established borrowing pajama and other expressions that we have. That is now part of the TL lexicon. Change of cultural meaning, and this is very interesting. I'll quote mainly from Meher, and then I'll go to the issue. I'll skip some of the quotations that I have given here in the paper. Ammi, I won't go to school. मैं कोशिश करूंगा मैं कोशिश करता हूँ. Ammi, I won't go to school. 5-year-old Afa came out with his verdict. What is this? Why won't you go to school? Just like that, Afa replied carelessly. Well, my son, I want to know why you won't go to school. Alia Khatun argued with Afa, pretending to treat him like an adult, and here he is using the word pretending to treat him like an adult. It is a horrible school. Don't talk like this, my son. Your school is very nice. You don't know, it is a horrible school. All the boys are dirty. The teachers are dirty. The classroom is dirty. Books are dirty. Stop this. You are being very naughty. Why do you call it dirty? Tell me. Now I'll give the Urdu version. Ammi, मैं स्कूल नहीं जाऊंगा. ये क्या बात हुई? तुम स्कूल क्यों नहीं जाओगे? बस यूं ही आफाक ने बहुत लापरवाही से जवाब दिया. आखिर मैं भी तो सुनूं, तुम स्कूल क्यों नहीं जाओगे? आलिया खातून ने आफाक को गोया बड़ा तस्लीम करके उससे जिरा की. वो बहुत गंदा स्कूल है. यूं नहीं बोलते बेटे, वो बहुत अच्छा स्कूल है. आपको क्या पता, वो बहुत गंदा स्कूल है. उसके सब लड़के गंदे हैं, टीचर गंदे हैं, क्लासरूम गंदा है, किताबें. बस अब बंद करो. तुम बहुत बदमाश हो गए हो. आखिर वो किस तरह गंदा स्कूल है? आखिर मैं भी तो जानूं. अब मैं आपको क्या बताऊं अम्मी, आप मानती ही नहीं. वो बहुत गंदा स्कूल है. आफाक रोने लगा. उसकी हिचकियां बंद गईं. आलिया खातून ने उसे गोद में उठा लिया और चुमकारने लगी. मोहब्बत की गर्मी पर आफाक को कुछ पिघलता मोहब्बत की गर्मी पर पाकर आफाक कुछ पिघलता हिचकियां बंद हुई तो आलिया खातून ने उसे मिठाइयां दी और फल दिए वगैरह वगैरह. मैं कुछ ऐसा छोड़ रहा हूँ इसका. Now the sense of Urdu word badmash in the original text is better conveyed by English word impish or badly behaved. Naughty does not convey the sense of disobedience that is sought to be conveyed in the source language text. A little later in the narrative we find the Urdu expression, a little later in the narrative we find the Urdu expression katwa is omitted in the translation. As you may be knowing that generally Muslims are teased by using these kinds of expressions. There is no mention of katwa, a derogatory expression generally used to tease Muslims in the translated text. By completely omitting this expression in translation, an important aspect of Muslim identity and the tension between the two communities has been suppressed by the translator. Without any reference to its existence or any of its details, it has been completely omitted from the translated text. The expression contains vital information on various modes of societal tension, and therefore, even in restricted translation, omissions on such a scale is not justifiable. Since the original novel by Abdus Samad seeks to discuss the societal tension, the effect of such omission has to be examined. Translation is just not a matter of decoding certain linguistic forms into meaning and encoding this into new forms. Translation goes beyond that. It is a complex mental process and involves a wide spectrum of decisions the translator has to make in order to achieve retextualization for an ideal reader. Then I cite some syntactic dimensions. Concerning the grammatical equivalence, it may be said that in the source text, most verbs are in past tense form, while in the target text, the same verbs are in present tense form. Tum bahut badmaash ho gaye ho. Now you are being very naughty. Now you can see the syntactic difference between these two expressions. In some instances, the use of present tense seems inappropriate, but in others it seems adequate, since the text refers to results of a study in which they talk about actions and situations which happen repeatedly. Also, by applying the present tense in the target text, the translator is trying to bring the reader closer to the content. Thus, we may be talking about an imaginary present time in which the use of fictional present appears to put the reader in the place of someone actually attending the events. In the source text, we may perceive that the marked term is the continuous referring to the progress of the event. However, in the translated text, the simple form is neutral. In relation to the progressive aspect was receiving, one could add that it lacks certainty with regard to the completeness of the event. Now I conclude with the remark that by browsing the whole text, it is clear that in most sections of the study, the Urdu text was longer than the English text. This led me to wonder if this is because Urdu words are longer or because in Urdu we tend to use more words to explain one thing. As a whole, translation is an art that requires a great deal of effort on the translator's part in trying to adapt the source text to the culture and linguistic aspects of the target text being produced. And even after having finished the translation, it is always open to improvement. Thank you.
I'm very glad that Professor Fatihi chose this particular text as an example of translation and as and analyzing this text as to how it was translated. Now, especially my students know the difference between the aptness and appropriateness of a translation by the examples that he gave, and also how you cannot exclude certain words which are particular to a socio-cultural group. You cannot exclude that. You cannot say, you cannot substitute certain words. So there must be footnotes and things in the text to enforce the meaning, endorse the meaning of those words. Otherwise, the meaning of a socio-cultural text is lost. I'm very glad, Professor Fatihi, that you chose this text. It was brought up in the discussion yesterday also. Meher Farooqi's translation of Khwabon Ka Savera. I also have problems about the title, Dawn of Dreams. It somehow does not convey the meaning. Anyway, I leave all this to Professor Zafaruddin. The audience may ask questions of Professor Fatihi if they wish to. The paper is...
It's more of an observation than a question. You brought up some very pertinent points. I think it's very, very important that while we are translating or anybody is translating, the milieu of the language should be kept intact, and it should be translated in a way that it finds equivalent. For instance, if you are using a phrase, if you're using a certain phrase like, for instance, you can't say looking for a needle in a haystack. In Urdu, you can't say that. You would say charag leke dhoonde to bhi na mile, or you would say Jewish kalana. Similarly, if you say if you are translating Jewish kalana into English, you cannot say to bring a canal of milk. That would have no meaning at all, because Jewish kalani ke piche puri kahani hai. So similarly, whenever there are these phrases these kahawatein, whenever they are translated, a similar word or a similar kind of legend or an allusion has to be found in order to convey the same meaning. And as I said that, thala cannot be translated. So it could be asked. But of course there are people who have done this sort of a thing. Rushdie has done it. My Little Piece of Moon. It is Mera Chand Ka Tukda. So Nanna Sa Chand Ka Tukda. In English it sounds very My Little Piece of Moon sounds like something odd. But then he has done this particularly. He has done it deliberately in order to introduce this kind of a language in English. And of course with that sometimes, in the language also, words like inshallah and all are understood everywhere. So there are, for instance, there are so many words, like avatar is one word, which is actually coming from our language. Similarly, the mantra of so and so is already used in another language. So there are some words which can be retained, but of course with the subtext. But there are some phrases and there are some allusions which have to be found. Equivalence has to be found in that language in order to make it effective. Otherwise, the whole essence of it is lost. And as I was saying in the earlier session, that language is just not language; it's a whole culture in itself.